Hello and welcome back to the Beyond the Big Six podcast. I did cut the introduction off there early, so apologies if people were enjoying that, but it is what it is. Today we're going to do a review of the weekend's Premier League results and also talk some news and notes. Obviously, it's been transfer deadline day as we record this on Monday, the 1st of September. We are going to do a full review of all the transfers and everything else later in the week, but we will cover off some of the main talking points. But before we get going, gents, how are we today? How are you, Niall, wearing a top that I asked you before we recorded what it was and I've forgotten? So please enlighten everyone as to what you are wearing right now.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm wearing an Ankara Gugu shirt. They're a Turkish team in the Turkish Super League, and I just like the colours. It's a bit Parma-esque sort of thing, and Fenerbahce, but it's not Parma or Fenerbahce, and it's just a bit different. I like the quirkiness on the shoulders as well. And I've always been a bit of a fan of Umbro stuff. So, yeah, something a bit different.
It feels to me, it looks like, I don't know if you remember this, but like Pro Star kits when you were a kid, when you used to get like your junior football tops. That's what it kind of looks like to me. Tony, how are you doing? I can see you're sporting an interesting Newcastle training top, I'm going to guess. Swirly black and white going on.
Marco Biso.
I've got no idea what you're talking about.
Did you not see the Unai Emery interview prior to the game?
Oh, yes, I did.
I thought his microphone was doing something funny there.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, is he saying the? I didn't know if he was saying the Villa keeper's name or not, and I didn't want to I was just like, what's he talking about? Then I was thinking, is Marco Bizzo maybe like some sort of French designer that has designed that Newcastle top? Because it was very
No. Yeah, so yeah, bit of a joke, but yeah, I'm good. This is last season's training kit. Yeah. I don't know if it's like a match warm-up kit or whatever, but I like the design of it. So yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, we'll talk about Newcastle to begin with. We'll talk obviously about all the games. And Newcastle's game, spoiler, was absolutely horrific, so I doubt we'll be talking about it for that long. But there is lots happening with Newcastle when it comes to the transfers. We will touch on their striker situation, and we'll also talk a little bit about Aston Villa after that before we dive into the games. But Tony, we'll start with you. The question that I have is, have Newcastle upgraded their front line on the presumption that Wissa gets done? Are Newcastle in a better place than what they were before the transfer window started, or do you think they've had a downgrade for I don't know how much money they're going to spend? Are they going to spend like 120 million maybe on that new front two? Is that roughly the costings? Do you think they've upgraded or downgraded? How are you feeling?
So yes and no. So we definitely needed two strikers in. That was a must. So bringing Wissa and Voltmara in is a big deal. To address that, but replacing Isak is always going to be difficult, whether you love him or hate him because of what he's done. He's an absolutely phenomenal player, and trying to replace that in your side is just, he's one of the world's best. So it remains to be seen. But with getting a player in Wissa who's consistently scored goals, yes, he's been a bit naughty as well in terms of forcing the move as well. So that cannot be sniffed at either. But yeah, Voltemara is a bit of a unknown quantity in the Premier League. So we'll see how he gets on, but he looks to be quite an exciting player. So we'll see how he gets on in the next couple of weeks, anyway.
Now, what do you make of these? Because I don't know. It feels like the Isak situation. The right thing is not the right thing. Obviously, the way he's went on is not right, but the right thing has happened in the sense that Newcastle obviously got a good chunk of change. Isak gets the move he wants. We don't talk about Liverpool, so it doesn't really matter their point of view on this. But I just sort of look at what Newcastle have brought in and the money they've spent. Like Wissa, 55 million is a lot of money. And the guy whose name I've forgotten they brought in from Germany, that's a lot of money on an unproven player who was a free transfer last summer. I'm just not massively convinced that Newcastle have handled the recruitment of their new forward line in the correct manner. Maybe that's a biased point of view, maybe. I don't know. But I don't know. I'm not convinced by these moves.
I don't know. It's a strange one because I think with Newcastle, their recruitment, I think Eddie Howe is largely involved in our recruitment, and we've seen, like I said in the previous podcast, we've seen what Eddie Howe can do with these players if he thinks they can fit. I mean, most of the signings, 99% of the signings Newcastle have made have turned out to be positive signings, and they've all done very well. I don't see why this will go any other way. I get what you're saying, that Voltamata, it might be unproven, but Alexander Isak was unproven. And let's not forget, Alexander Isak was signed as a winger. He was a winger at Real Sociedad. He wasn't an out-and-out striker. He didn't play week in, week out there anyway. So, all this talk, and I was one of them. I watched Voltamata in the Euros, the under-21 Euros in the summer. I didn't think he was an out-and-out striker. So I confused us a little bit. But if Newcastle feel like they can make sure that is his position, I think he can play in every position anyway. But if that's the position that they're wanting him for, and they're going to work with him on it, and the brilliant players they've got working alongside him, I don't see why that wouldn't work. It is a risk, but isn't every transfer a risk? And with Johan Wissa, the 55 million, I mean, if you look at that alone, it's a ridiculous amount of money for a player with 1 year left who's 29-year-old, if you look at it just in that context. But when you bring the context in that, I don't know if it's gone through, but I've seen Asula might be leaving for £30 million now.
No, that's not happening.
Not happening, right? But at the time, they might have thought that they were getting that in.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what's thought. What it is. We're selling him for 30. It's actually money worth spending. I think it's got to the point where it had to be a nuclear option for Newcastle. They knew they were going to have to pay the money for Wissa. They knew. Let's not forget, Wissa scored 20 goals last season in the Premier League. He wasn't that far behind Alexander Isak. They get the 20-goal striker who's desperate to go there. Let's forget about the naughty stuff and the refusing to play, because that's a conversation for another day. When we're talking about actual football, they've got a proven Premier League striker who scores goals. They paid a lot of money for him. Is it a lot of money for them when it's something they desperately needed? It probably isn't. It's probably worth it. Even if they get one great season out of Wissa, then they get a good season out of him where he's on and off the bench when he's 30, 31. They look at that money well spent. So, yeah, I know what you're saying. It might look like they don't look as strong going forward as what they did last season, but I think there's a lot of unknowns there, and I can't see it working for them.
I was going to talk about Aston Villa next, but you know what? We'll save Aston Villa for when we talk about their game against Crystal Palace. We'll jump into the weekend review. West Ham, that's where I want to start today, because they've taken a lot of flack, particularly by me, since the start of the season. I've been pretty critical of West Ham. I think it's fair enough. Their fans have been pretty critical as well. But what we've been calling for, and we've talked about it on this podcast, is the three at the back hasn't worked. And at the weekend, they go to four at the back. They look far more balanced. They looked far better, in my opinion. The game was level until 82 minutes, I think it was. And it was fair. I thought West Ham played well. I thought Forest did enough to stay in the game. They made changes. Somerville came on, made a massive difference for West Ham. And West Ham ended up winning the game 3-0. And I think, and from West Ham's perspective, they must be feeling pretty happy now. I think they're probably a bit annoyed that they had two games that they basically gave away because of the ridiculous formation. But it made me think that, you know what, they've got a lot of quality players. They've kept Paqueta, it looks like, through deadline day. They've added a few players as well. I think that it's looking a bit more rosy for West Ham. And I think the thought that I had that they might be in really, really big trouble. Look, I still think they're going to be in a bit of trouble this season. But at least we saw at the weekend that Graham Potter is going to change things and not allow it to stick with three at the back. And they just, for me, looked far more balanced in that game against Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, definitely. A bit of the gloom's kind of risen, hasn't it? So, the negativity that was surrounding the club, and, Jared Bowen arguing with away fans, it's never a good look. But to come back and to score that goal and, go to Forest and get a result, that's no small feat. That, last season Forest didn't lose many games at home. So, it's a big result that, and it's a big jab in their arm to say, actually, going forward, we can actually get results against some of these teams who, Forest, absolutely brilliant last season. The form dipped towards the end, but wow, and from a managerial point of view, it doesn't look all that great for Nuno Espirito Santo. After the game, questions being asked, having peace talks with the owner and things like that. Will you be happy to take them into Europe? That's worrying, especially when you've got Graham Potter on the other side going, yeah, we're getting 3 points, this is great. So, yeah, it isn't how I kind of thought that. I don't think any of us thought the fixture was going to go that way. So, it's mad.
Now, what do you make of Forest? The growing concerns there, because I'm getting more. I'm not saying Forest are going to be in relegation trouble now, but I'm getting a little bit more concerned. It feels like there's a lot of chaos in Nottingham Forest that Nuno's done a good job of keeping in the background, but I feel like that chaos is really coming to the forefront right now. And we sort of saw the result of that at the weekend.
I don't think they're going to be anywhere near where they were last season. To be honest, I just think there's too much going on. I think there's been too much going on at that football club for a long, long time. I know the Forest supporters seem to kind of like that, and they like the quirkiness of it. But any owner who's willing to take a point deduction, in order to spend the money they want to spend and take that risk is a bit of a, it's a bit of a crazy one. So I just think that's always been the case with them. I don't think they're going to be anywhere near relegation. I think they've got far too much quality for that. Elliot Anderson being the standout name for me for Nottingham Forest. I think he's absolutely superb in everything he does. Fully deserved his England call up this week. So yeah, I don't think there's going to be anything wrong. To be honest, this game it's been an interesting weekend in the Premier League because this is one of 5 games where the team who's had the least possession in the game by quite a large number has won. So it's it's a big chunk of games that where 5 of them have done it. So it just kind of feels like the pendulum's swinging on that a little bit, and possession isn't the be all and end all like what it used to be. So yeah, it's one of them. I don't think you can look too much into this game and think, oh, West Ham are definitely going to be safe. Forest are definitely in a battle. I just think it was one of them strange games where they come around every now and again. So yeah.
Yeah, it's the battle of the low blocks in the Premier League right now. I think we've seen that in a lot of games. I mean, even the game I was at Sunderland Brentford, it was low block v low block. I think Leeds against Newcastle was a bit of, we want to try and sit in and counter attack. Oh, and we do as well. So it's not making for great watching. Anyway, let's move on. Brighton, massive win against Man City. I had Brighton 5th in pre-season, so I'm glad they won this one because they've had a bit of a sticky start, 1 point from their opening 2. For me, I think this is just the reason why I had Brighton to finish 5th this season is just that I thought Newcastle and Aston Villa both just don't look their best right now. And obviously we will talk about Aston Villa coming up soon. And I just think there's the next team up in the Premier League in terms of quality is Brighton compared to them too. I think there's an obvious sort of top 4, and I think Newcastle and Villa have been 5th and 6th the last few years, in my opinion, in terms of the best teams in the league. And I think Brighton have been 7th, and I just think that Newcastle and Villa are not going to have as successful a season. They're going to be in Europe, and I wasn't surprised that Brighton beat Man City. And I think that if they can just find a way of getting over the line in the games against the lower teams in the Premier League, which is where they've really struggled at home in particular, they've dropped silly points at home. I don't see a reason why they won't be at least fighting pretty closely for 5th place in the Premier League. But Tony, what did you make of Brighton's win? And do you understand maybe I'm not saying necessarily agree, but do you understand why I would have them 5th in the Premier League at the start of the season because of what's happening with Newcastle and Aston Villa, but also the fact that Brighton just seem to have players in quality where they can win games like this. They can beat anyone in the Premier League on their day.
So the first half was quite an evenly matched game between them and City. And if anything, I think that they did all right initially against them. And then the second half and those substitutes, Hertzler brought those 4 players on and the game just swung. Standout performance from Yankuba Minte. Gruder came on and he looked good. He forced a lot. He had defenders worried. Ruta came on, and his hold up play and his linking, it was just absolutely phenomenal. They thoroughly deserved the win. The stadium was bouncing. It made a big difference. Those substitutes, and City just looked a bit shell shocked. And it's nice to see. I like it when the big boys are struggling. What a performance from Brighton, and I can kind of see where you're coming from that perspective. They certainly were good. Based on that second half performance, that they could take on most.
Well, that segues nicely into Palace's 3-0 win at Villa. And obviously, we're going to talk about how good Palace were. But the concerning thing is about Aston Villa, Niall. They not had, I know they've done a bit of work today on deadline day. I'm not actually 100% sure what they've got exactly over the line. I know they're after Harvey Elliott. Jadon Sancho's been linked. Has anyone else been linked there? I can't remember if anyone else has been linked there. But it looks like they're going to do... Lindelof signed as well at centre-back. So they have done a little bit of business on deadline day. But I thought Villa looked really poor against Crystal Palace last night. And I was talking about Newcastle and Villa being the 5th and 6th teams in the Premier League. And that's why I think them spots are open right now, because I just think Villa, I'm just a bit worried about them with Europe as well this season. I just don't think they're going to be as competitive this season at the top end of the league.
I agree. I think that team's looking a little bit stale. That they've brought in a few players, as you say. Well, we think they have anyway. We're not sure who they've actually got in. Jadon Sancho, as you say. I'm not sure if that's been confirmed yet, but they've tried to bring these players in to freshen it up a little bit. I don't know. They just feel like there's something sort of grumbling there. I know Unai Emery's seemingly getting very frustrated by the lack of transfer business he was able to do this summer, and I just a little bit like Newcastle's window in the sense where it was very slow, but at least Newcastle's, it managed to take off a little bit towards the end. Aston Villa weren't able to do that, and I just think it's been underwhelming for them. They've had a poor start of the season, really. The draw against Newcastle isn't the worst because of the fact they had 10 men as well. But they lose their home record so early in the season when they've done so well with it. They obviously got beat Brentford last week. It was not a very good performance at all, really. And to have this now where I haven't really brought anyone in, and then last night I thought Palace were excellent, as Ant said. As you said, I thought Palace were really good, but there's just something not right going on there. It feels like there's something grumbling, like I said, and it wouldn't surprise me if Unai Emery had enough at some point. If these results keep going that way, he could walk. It wouldn't surprise us at all. So I wouldn't say worrying times for Aston Villa, because I still think they've got a top side for the Premier League, but it's not going to be as rosy as what it was last season. I would be very surprised if it was.
I don't think Unai Emery will leave while they're still in the Europa League. That trophy's got his DNA all over it. So I think as long as they're in that and he's got a chance of winning it, he'll stick around. Tony Palace, played in Europe on Thursday, go to Aston Villa away and win 3-0. Mark Gay scored an unbelievable goal for a centre-back, and it looks like he's staying as well. So that's good news for Crystal Palace. Well, where are Crystal Palace right now in your mind? They've got 5 points, unbeaten to start the season, and this seemed to be the icing on top of the cake for a pretty good week for them.
Glasnell will certainly be chuffed with the fact that deal fell through at the last minute. He was saying it was incredibly important for Gahey to stay, so I think he'll be quietly chuffed. Or maybe not. He might be very outwardly chuffed for that one, and it certainly helps his back line. That's for sure. I know they've got another player in. I'm not sure where he plays though. I'll be honest. I know they were trying to get Ego from Brighton as well, but because that's the reason it kind of fell through, because he ended up going to West Ham, didn't he? So yeah, cracking result. Again, they were probably unlucky against Chelsea earlier this season, so there's a lot of positivity around Palace at the minute. It's quite surprising how well they're doing. off the back of that FA Cup win. They're flying, really. So yeah, especially losing Eze as well. You know, we did think that would have a big impact. You know, but Mateta's still there, and he's still a cracking player. And if they can keep a hold of him, who knows?
JD Canvot, maybe centre back anyway. So they brought in a centre back. We'll move on. Sunderland beat Brentford 2-1. And I want to talk here. We talk about atmosphere on here a little bit, and we've had many a debate. And I was listening to Kieran Brady, who used to play for Sunderland. People probably aren't familiar with him because he retired very young, and he'd said that he doesn't buy into crowd. He thinks it's a lazy narrative that crowds make a difference, but he thinks that the Sunderland one at the weekend did make a difference. And he says that if you have sort of that elite level, top level crowd where everyone's pulling in the same direction, it can make a difference in the game. So I think that it can be a lazy narrative, but I do think that it can make a difference at times. So I'll concede the point on that one if a former player is saying it, but I thought it was just interesting to bring that up. But Niall, this is a win for Sunderland that I think is more impressive because they did face quite a bit of adversity in the game. Obviously, conceded a penalty, which was saved. Was a terrible penalty, to be fair, but well saved by Robin Roofs. They then go 1 goal down on 77 minutes. And I think to turn a Premier League game around when you're 1-0 down on 77 minutes and win 2-1, I think it shows a lot of resilience in character. And I think Sunderland should take a lot of heart from the fact they've been able to beat an established Premier League team when 1-0 down with 15 minutes left, and they've been able to turn it around and win the game 2-1. I thought it was just it's a bit of a statement, as much of a statement as their opening day 3-0 win against West Ham.
Yeah, the character that Sunderland showed was excellent. They went toe-to-toe with them in the sense that it was a bit of a hard-hitting game, you know, a bit scrappy at times, certainly in the first half, but I just think Sunderland come out on top in a lot of those battles. Brentford obviously had the disallowed goal, which, you know, Sunderland had to let off. Then obviously there's the penalty, which, you know, these penalties, I get why they're given. It's interesting that they're only getting given this season. These tussles in the penalty area have been going on for years and years. And people have always said, well, how's that not a foul? And the referees never used to really give them. And, you know, for him to give both of those penalties, which were, I mean, he had to give the Sunderland one after he gave the Brentford one. I understand that. But two interesting decisions. Robin Roofs, a superb save. He's done very well. And what I liked about that as well is he didn't celebrate the save. And I like stuff like that. All he cared about, as soon as he made that save, he straight away, if you look at him, he's saying to the players, you get over here, you get over here. And he's marshalling that back four. He's not jumping up and down. And, you know, this is a goalkeeper who's 22 years old, who's playing his third ever Premier League game, and he's just saved the penalty to keep the game at 0-0, and he's not celebrating at all. And that's a kind of mentality thing that you want in a goalkeeper or any player for that matter. And then obviously again, then they face the adversity and they go 1-0 down with 13 minutes left to play on the clock. And, you know, I don't know about you, but that's a stab in the chest. When it's that late in the game, you think, oh, you know, this was such a big game and we're going to be lucky to even get a draw. But the fight back, you know, it kind of woke everybody up. As he said, Kieran Brady said, the atmosphere kind of sucked Sunderland towards that end of the pitch. And they got the decision with a penalty, great penalty from Enzo Lefebvre. And then it's just a case of, can we nick it? And at that stage, I'm thinking, point isn't terrible. At least we haven't got beat. It's an international break. 4 points from the first 3 games is a good return. A point isn't awful. Let's just stick at this. And you know what it is? They went and they've shocked her. And a great ball in the penalty area from Granit Xhaka and a great header. And I think Anthony will agree with this. When things are going right at a football club, you get moments like that. Even if you're not playing well, you get those kind of moments. And, you know, things are going right at Sunderland. I mean, this is, for me personally, this is the best shape the football club's ever been in terms of how it's run, in terms of financially, in terms of the recruitment and the scouting systems and everything they've got in place. It's the best it's ever been run, and it's getting the respect from the supporters, from the outside world that it's probably deserved in the past and not quite getting. So, you know, the feel-good factor's there. And when you have feel-good factor there, sometimes you don't have to play the best, but you can get across the line because the belief in the stands does pass on to the pitch a lot of the time. So, fantastic win for them. 6 points out the first 3 games. Superb. They've had a superb transfer window. They've filled in every gap they needed. They're getting depth in every position. It's just been a really good few months for Sunderland. And, you know, they've got tough games coming up. They've got a massive game against Crystal Palace. Then they're at Old Trafford. Then we've got Aston Villa. You know, it's going to be tough, but at least they're getting points on the board early, and they've given themselves, the supporters, and everyone involved with the football club belief, which is the most important thing.
And Tony, I think you had Sunderland to go down. I think you had all the newly promoted teams to go down this season. If you like wavered on that at all, like you look at obviously Sunderland beat West Ham and Brentford, who were teams that I think I had there or thereabouts. I think I also had Sunderland to go down, to be fair, though. So it's not like I'm saying that I was calling Sunderland to save, because I wasn't. But you changed your sort of thoughts on the newly promoted teams and where they are in relation to teams like Wolves, Brentford, and West Ham, who I think are the 3 weakest of the established 17. Do you think any of them have got a chance of overtaking them this season? And do you see one of them staying up?
Can I start off by saying you can hear the excitement in Niall's voice when he's talking about how Sunderland are getting on and going to these stadiums and all the rest of it, and it's really refreshing because it's not often you get that. So I just wanted to highlight that. But yeah, it does make you think, because you know the teams that come up, it's always like in recent years, it's always been the same teams going down. It's been a constant struggle. The gap between the Premier League and the Championship just keeps on getting bigger and bigger. The money keeps on on transfer spends and everything. Just it goes mental every year. You know, it seems to be getting crazier and crazier, and it's so hard to keep up. But the promoted teams, I mean, Burnley against Man United, they played fantastic. Yous have getting a cracking result there. It was almost like that game against Brentford was almost like a boxer, and you were just kept on throwing punches, and then you hit him on the jaw, and like you stunned him, and then you just kept on pushing for the knockout, and you got it. You know, it was fantastic, like to watch. So you know that ball, like you say, from Granit Xhaka as well, the cross, the ball beforehand to the winger, that cuts it back inside for him as well. Just absolutely cracking, you know. And for him to get the criticism he did last week at Burnley when you weren't so good, you know, to turn up and perform like he did, it's got to be respected. So have I changed my mind? I don't think I have. Not quite yet. I think it's a bit too early for us to have like swayed us that much, but it certainly gives food for thought.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at, we'll talk about Wolves against Everton. That's a nice segue. And then we'll talk about Fulham getting robbed at Chelsea. But Wolves losing against Everton. Niall, Wolves, I mean, concerning for them, isn't it? They were a really bad start of the season. I do want to talk about how good Everton were, but we'll start with Wolves. I just think they're really struggling. And I'm concerned for them right now. I don't think they're in a good place at all right now. The manager is somebody who doesn't stick around for very long. He's had like a million jobs, and I don't think he'll be sticking around here if he doesn't get what he wants. I don't think they've done all that well in the transfer market as well. I don't know. I just think Wolves, maybe they're circling the drain, and maybe this is the season where the drain finishes circling and they just fall down it.
I mean, the Wolves supporters certainly think so. My wife's from Wolverhampton, and I know a few Wolves fans on the back of that, and they pretty much think they're doomed. I think keeping Strand Larsen at the football club is massive for them. I did think there was going to be a stage today where I was going to say that he was going to go to Newcastle, because I know he wanted that move, and he didn't play against Everton. So that's a big thing for them. They've been able to keep a hold of him. They've also brought in that other striker. I forgot his name, from Belgium. I think it's a Genk he's come from. Top scorer in the Belgian league last season. 6'6", I think he is, something like that. He's a big lad. It's, you know, that could work for them to have. You know, try to add more goals. It's a tough one. They've had a very bad start. I've always thought Wolves have got a very good chance of going down. I think I put that in my predictions. I think I had them relegated. But again, they've always done very well with that recruitment, and we're yet to see these new players they've brought in. There's not a lot of them, but they have brought some players in. They tend to get the recruitment right, which is why they end up losing the players at the end of the season. So I don't think it's completely doom and gloom. I don't think that trapdoor is fully open for them, but they've got a bit of a mountain to climb already, haven't they? So that game, they play. I think they play Sunderland fairly soon. I'm sure they've got, is it Burnley as well coming up? So big games for them. And if they don't get points from those games, you got to look and you've got to think it might be the season where they fall through.
Yeah, notoriously bad starters as well, to be fair, Wolves, and they do generally turn it around. But Tony, last week we got a bit of criticism in the comments that we weren't praising Everton enough for the win against Brighton. So I think we should really flag how good their attacking line looks. They terrorised Wolves in this game. Jack Grealish, we talked about him when he signed in, whether or not they were going to get the Aston Villa Jack Grealish, who's so exciting, and that is the player again. He just looks fantastic. He looks like a £100 million player. I know that sounds ridiculous, but that's what he was a few years ago, and I think he looks like that again. And Dye, top quality player. Beto, he obviously gets a goal the weekend. Dewsbury Hall scores an unbelievable goal. I think Everton have sneakily sort of now entered the conversation where I'm looking at them and thinking they might actually be a threat towards sort of the top 8 this season. I'm genuinely that impressed with them over the last couple of games, and just that forward line. Just the forward line, it just excites us. I just love everything about the attack and play at the minute.
So I really like Andy. I think he's a quality player. Getting him wouldn't have been such a bad move for Newcastle. But Grealish looks back to his best, a lot like what you say. The player that everybody had him as he came from Villa, he just seems to have come back to his feet. So that's a big deal. And I did say Dewsbury Hall was a good pickup. I think that went under the radar. Like a lot of clubs potentially could have picked him up, and I think he's a good player. He was top notch at Leicester, and I think a lot of teams kind of missed out.
By the way, that goal he scored.
Yeah, but it's nothing to be sniffed at. He's a quality midfielder. So, and obviously Niall's boy Beto, he's a big lump, and he gets about, and he's just a unit, isn't he? So yeah, there's a lot of positives from Everton. So yeah, wax lyrical about Everton. European places, I think that might be a bit of a stretch, but certainly a very positive start.
I think they'll be closer to the top 8 than what they are the bottom 5. That's probably where I'll put them. I don't think they'll be necessarily a threat again to the sort of the top 8, but I think they'll be closer to that than what they are the other end of the table.
I'd agree.
Bournemouth, Niall, they win at Spurs. This was a really, really impressive. Spurs just didn't have anything in the game. Bournemouth nullified them. Probably should have won the game like 3 or 4-0. And I think this is really impressive because Bournemouth have obviously lost so many players this summer. They've been cherry-picked by some of Europe's top clubs, and they just look like they've not missed a step. I think that manager's proven how good of a manager he is. And I just think this was a real statement win for them to just quiet this Tottenham team that literally beat Man City 2-0 last weekend at the Etihad. They just nullified them and won the game comfortably. It should have been more than 1-0.
Yeah, they absolutely battered them. It was a really good watch for Bournemouth, to be honest with you. And I know Ant's waxed lyrical about Bournemouth for a long time now and the way that they play. And how they always play with the overlap, and they always, they play right on the line as well. It's really good to watch. I think I spoke a while ago about who maybe Newcastle and Aston Villa could bring in. Newcastle to replace Isak, Aston Villa to replace Watkins, because at the time it looked like he might leave. Who they could possibly bring in. And Evan Nielsen was a name that I was very surprised has not been branded about. And that's probably because his goal record probably isn't enough to be branded about at that level. He looks like he's putting that right. He looks like he's adding that part of his game. Still young. He looks like he's got everything about him. And that finish is superb, by the way. That is an excellent finish. And yeah, I think he's got a lot about him. Bournemouth seem to have these gems that they just pull out the bag. And he could well be, he could be the next one that all the big clubs are after. I can see like Newcastle or an Aston Villa or someone like that, or a Tottenham, trying to get him in sort of January or in the summer, because he seems he's got that bit of awareness, that bit of movement. You see, he plays on the last man. He's very exciting to watch. In the end, they thought he deserved it, and fair play to them, because all us three had Spurs. Or you might have had it. Yeah, no, I think all us three had Spurs. I don't think anybody thought anything other than the Spurs winning that game. So fair play to them to go there. Even last season, I know they got beat off Ipswich and Leicester at home, but it's still, you look at that fixture, it doesn't matter who you are, you think Tottenham, that massive stadium, it's a hard place to go. And to go there when they're winning, like they are, and win, is a very big feat. So fair play to them.
I had Spurs to draw 1-1 with Bournemouth. Tony had Spurs to win 2-1. And Niall, you had Spurs to win 3-0. So you definitely struggled there. I haven't actually tallied up what we did in the predictions, so we'll do that on the next episode. Burnley, they impressed at Man United. I know Tony touched on Burnley before. I'm still not sure what to make of Burnley. I think I need to see them play like a sort of mid-table, well, maybe Man United or a mid-table Premier League team, to be fair. But we need to see them play somebody like Bournemouth, or not Bournemouth, Brentford or West Ham, like what Sunderland had this season, to get a gauge of where Burnley are, because they've played Tottenham away and Man United away. They're just strange games to see. And then they've played Sunderland at home, which again is a weird game because we don't know what Sunderland are, particularly away from home this season. I'm just not sure I've got a gauge, Tony, of where Burnley are right now. I don't know if we're looking at a team that's going to pick up 35 points and have a chance of staying up, or if we're looking at more of what we've seen the last couple of years where these newly promoted teams have finished with like early 20s. I don't know. I'm just not sure with Burnley.
Well, I mean, they did do quite well against the side that finished 17th last season. So, there's a lot of positives to pull out of that game. That the VAR though, the VAR this weekend has been absolutely appalling, because that offside decision is just absolutely disgraceful. I don't know how they've gotten away with it. I really don't. Like, they do talk, put our tinfoil hats on and, talk conspiracy theories here. But my God, it's hard not to, because you're looking and thinking that's another decision that's gone the way of one of these big six clubs. And you look and think, how on earth are they getting away with it? It's unbelievable. They've been robbed of a point, really, for me, but like you say, I do think it's one of those. It's a bit difficult to predict, because Man United and Spurs have they're erratic. You cannot really predict them. But Burnley, I don't know. They look good in spells in that game, and kind of really willing them on because my dislike for Man United. But there's just something there that they just don't have that edge. They have signed that Florentino Luis from Benfica, I believe. He's a football manager legend from back in the day. So will he come and steady that ship? It remains to be seen. But there is a lot of positives that Burnley fans can take from that game, because they went to Old Trafford and the players turned up and they really stood up. So I would take that as a positive. Put it that way.
I mean, we'll talk a little bit about VAR, I suppose. And I forgot to mention Fulham obviously were robbed at Chelsea now. So let's talk about that decision as well, the disallowed goal there, but also the penalty decision in the Man United game. I don't think is getting enough sort of coverage, because I don't know how they can decipher whether or not that it was a foul. I'm not disputing that. It was definitely a foul. But was it in the box? Can we conclusively say that was 100% in the box? Certainly the angle. I mean, maybe they've got different camera angles they've not shown us, but why wouldn't they show us them? I just think both of them decisions, I mean, the Fulham one in particular, that was very egregious. At least the offside you're talking about, Tony, I think Burnley did actually score after that to equalise. So I think they kind of cancelled itself out because they got the goal. But the Fulham one, they were absolutely robbed with that goal. And then the penalty decision at the end of the Burnley game against Man United was also a weird one for me.
Yeah, the Fulham one hurts me eyes. It hurts your eyes because I tell you what, that lad, what a turn that is. He's been totally robbed. And I'm sorry, but whoever's made that decision, what I don't understand is that decision's been made in VAR, right? The referee is watching the decision. He can turn around and say, no, you know, Liz, I disagree with you, because every other person on the entire planet disagreed. So I find it very hard to believe that the only person that agrees is the other person involved in this. It makes no sense. It's a disgusting decision. Obviously, we all know the time that it added on. Chelsea went and scored. Nah, I'm not having it. And they can go out and they can apologise to Fulham and say, listen, you know, sorry, we got it wrong. What good is that? Just do your jobs. Listen, everyone makes mistakes. I don't have a problem with mistakes. That's not a mistake to me. That's not a mistake. It's outright. It's incompetence. It's not a mistake. I don't know how they've come to that conclusion, how more than one person's come to that conclusion. And then the young lad, Josh King, first Premier League goal, taken off. So, you know, it's just such a shame. If that happened to one of our teams, you know, you'd be furious, and rightly so. And it doesn't look good because it's the second one Chelsea have had this season. Yes, technically the Eze free kick was the right decision, but it's a rule that has never been enforced. It's a rule that's been there. We've seen it happen a few times, and it's never been enforced. Chelsea even scored one of them last season against Bournemouth, and it was never enforced. So they've got that decision, and then they're getting this one, and it's a real shame. And then you talk about the penalty that was given against Chelsea as well. Is that not harsh? Sorry, against Fulham. Is that not a harsh decision? For me, it is. I thought I wasn't 100% sure. So, yeah, it's a massive shame when it comes to that, when Fulham have played so well. And let's not forget, that is a local derby as well. The two clubs don't like each other. And to have that, you know, it's just, they've been let down by the system. And it's a massive shame.
Yeah, if that happened in the Sunderland Newcastle game and one of us had a goal disallowed, that you almost would feel embarrassed to brag at the end of the game, wouldn't you? You'd be like, it's a tainted victory. But 3 points on the board for Chelsea anyway. Fulham absolutely robbed. I agree. We'll finish off though, Tony. Leeds drawing with Newcastle, and boy oh boy did I waste my Saturday evening watching this. What an absolute tripe game of football this was. I can't recall much happening. I think Josh Murphy maybe had one shot. Or Jacob Murphy. I always get the two of them mixed up with their brothers. That's all I remember from the game. I just feel like nothing happened. I thought both teams were functional. Both teams were like organized and sturdy. Neither had any real threat in the game. I am very concerned about Leeds' attacking line. Surprised they've not addressed that on deadline day. I think Leeds are going to struggle to score goals. They've scored one this season, which came from a dodgy penalty decision. I think Pascal Strug had a decent header against Arsenal, and that's about as close as they've come to scoring a goal this season. And that was a corner. They don't look like scoring goals in open play. And I thought Newcastle, the position that they're in right now, this is probably a great time for Leeds to play them. I think Newcastle, I know they had players playing in the game, but I think they've got obviously a lot of niggles. I don't know if necessarily their players were fully fit for it. And it's probably a good draw for Newcastle. I think they'd take going to a newly promoted team, getting a 0-0 draw. It's a good draw for them. Leeds are probably happy with the 0-0 draw as well. But I think there's alarm bells for Leeds United. I think Newcastle, it was a functional draw. They had to get through it. They obviously had that ridiculous game on Monday night where they got suspensions and injuries. For Leeds, though, I'm a little bit worried about them. But anyway, what was your takeaway from this one? What's the Newcastle perspective? And then we'll get Niall to give the Leeds perspective.
So, just give a shout out to Sean Longstaff as well, because he, for all it was a bit of a ball draw, he did play well. And it's good to see. You know, I wish him well. He was cracking for us, so hats off to him. Yeah, it was a boring game. It was terrible. You know, was there much happens? No, not particularly. A couple of shots on target for either side, really. Dominic Calvert-Lewin came on and he tested Pope at one point, but there wasn't much of note in the game. It was almost as if either side was fighting to lose more than anything, and yeah, just not a. I think partly in the back of certainly Newcastle players' heads is that transfer window was still open. They still have the whole Alexander Isak thing going on, and the striker situation. Willa played up front. Yes, he scored against Liverpool there on Monday night, but he doesn't look the finished article, and I don't think Eddie really has the confidence in him, and that probably leaks into the squad as well. So certainly from a Newcastle perspective, I think the window closing is probably going to be what helps with the kick on. At least that's what I'm hoping anyway. It should make a big difference now that there's not players who have that uncertainty hanging over them. This is our squad, this is what we're going ahead with, and hopefully it'll eke out some results and make the difference.
Niall, what was your take from the Leeds side of things? I think you can gather that I am not massively impressed with where Leeds are right now.
No, neither am I. I just need to make sure that tomorrow night when this podcast released, there's not pitchforks outside my window. Because the Leeds fans, they have been getting a bit frustrated with some of the things we've said about them in the last two podcasts. But the reality is, listen, I've sat here and waxed lyrical about Sunderland, and I'm not doing the same about Leeds, and they're probably going to think I'm biased. My view on that is I feel like Sunderland upgraded virtually every position and found depth. I don't feel like Leeds have done that as much. The likes of Dan James and Willie Nonto, they can play in the Premier League? Are they going to be the difference? Players like that, I'm not sure. I think Leeds' defence is okay. That might be decent for them this season, but as you touched on, I worry for them going forward. There's nothing that tells me that Dominic Calvert-Lewin has got, these goals in him to keep them up. I think Dominic Calvert-Lewin's a good player. He's a handful. He's probably a nightmare to play against if you're a defender, but is he good enough? You watch that game against Newcastle, and I think the only real chance I remember them having was right at the end when Nick Pope started to make a save. I can't remember the Leeds player who took the shot on, but it's, they're just not creating anything. As you said, they've scored one goal. Yes, they played Arsenal, and if you look at it, out of their start, 4 points out of the first 3 games is a very good return, and that's the way they're going to look at that, and that's fine, and I agree with it. I do worry for them. I just don't think they've got enough. Sunderland is the unknown. So when Leeds fans say, well, Sunderland, they're the unknown, whereas Leeds, I don't feel like it's like that. Sean Longstaff, he's a solid Premier League player. I don't think he's the difference, and that's my issue. I don't think Leeds have enough difference makers. And Mecca, again, they're not difference makers, and that's why I just feel like it's going to be a struggle for them. I just don't rate their side, unfortunately. I think it's a terrific championship team with a few additions.
I think that's harsh. I think Leeds are a Premier League team until they get the front three. I think that the rest of the team is Premier League level. I like a lot of the players they've brought in. I think Stack's a good sign. I think Longstaff's a really good sign. I think their back four is strong. I think Ampadu a Premier League player. I think that goalkeeper, although his kicking's a little bit dodgy, I think he's certainly an upgrade on Meslier. They haven't really upgraded the front line though, and that is the massive concern. Calvert-Lewin, if he can hit the ground running, and he can't, Calvert-Lewin could score them 8 to 10 goals this season. And if Calvert-Lewin does score 8 to 10 goals, that might give Leeds a chance. I don't think they'll concede a ton of goals. I think I will say that for them. I think actually all 3 newly promoted teams are probably at their best in defensive midfield, and all 3 have got issues in the front line. I don't know. I think Leeds' front line, just what I've seen of the opening 3 games, they just don't look like they're creating chances.
Yeah, listen, I agree with what you're saying in the sense that it is more the forward line, and maybe I am being slightly harsh. I don't see where the goals are coming from in midfield either. You know, and you can't always rely on your front line. How many goals did Sean Longstaff score? How many goals did
He
Gulev
can score goal. I think though, like
goal scorers?
Longstaff and Stack though might get them 3 or 4 goals from midfield. I think for me, it's just
so you've got 12 goals now. So you've got Calvert-Lewin scoring 8, them 2 scoring 2 each. So you've got 12 goals.
Well, yeah.
You know what I mean? Dan James
3 or
and
4
Willie
each.
Monroe. This has turned into more of a debate now, which is what we love. But
Yeah.
Dan James and Willie Nonto, for me, are not at that level. I've seen they were trying to sign Harry Wilson today. You know, like
I would have liked that though. That would have. That's what I was hoping Leeds did on deadline day. Like I think they needed to add a quality like Premier League, because you can say what you want about Harry Wilson, but at least he's a proven Premier League player who's played probably 150 Premier League games, and Fulham use him all the time. Like I think that would have been a really good addition for them. They needed to bring in players like that.
Yeah, I agree. But again, it's just why didn't they get him? Like, you know what I mean?
No, they should have got him.
Yeah, this is the thing. So I don't know. I don't. Maybe we should just sit on the fence and say let Ant have the final say on what he thinks about Leeds, and then he can side whoever he side with, and that can be the winner of this debate. I know you're going to win in the comments afterwards anyway, but like I said, that's just my view on it. You're probably right. It probably is more just the forward line is more championship than what the back line is. But if Calvert-Lewin, as you say, if he can hit his form, they might have a chance.
Okay, Tony, we'll go on then. Are you more on my team or Niall's team quickly before we sign off?
I would probably say I lean more towards Connor, if I'm honest. With Longstaff, he has this knack of just getting into the right areas at times, and he will chip in with a couple of goals. There's Calvert-Lewin. The biggest thing for Calvert-Lewin is keeping him fit. If you can keep him fit, he will score your goals. So I think that's the biggest challenge. If they can keep him fit and they can get him in the side, he's a handful for any defence.
You see that though? He was fit last season and scored 3 goals.
He hasn't been on the regular though, and when you're up against the likes of Ndai and Beto, who've been performing, do you play him?
Maybe.
No?
Is Niall paying tribute to Roman Reigns here, or has he got his hand up?
No, I wanna just add something. So Sean Longstaff scored 10 goals in 171 appearances. Not buying it. It's not buying it. It's not going to get the goals. I'm sorry.
I didn't say he was a regular goal scorer.
You said he can crop up. He crops up.
He's finishing, on the other hand. Not so good. Not so good.
Yeah.
He gets in the right areas.
Right. So Dominic Calvert-Lewin's
when it comes to pulling the trigger.
Yeah. So Dominic Calvert-Lewin rebounds. There you go. I get you.
I do feel like Sean Longstaff scores more than that. I mean, 1 in 17 is like his average there. I feel like he scored for goals for Newcastle all the time. But there we are. Anyway.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I think that was just his Premier League stats, but still, I'm
scored against PSG. There we go.
He did.
Right, that's the perfect way to sign off. Anyway, a lovely debate about Leeds. It took 58-ish minutes. Nobody will see Niall's cock up earlier in the podcast when he couldn't talk about Nottingham Forest. We'll put it in the blooper reel at the end of the season. But thanks, guys, for joining us. Thanks. Yeah, absolute chaos. Thanks to everyone for watching as well. Please like and subscribe. Comment. Let us know why we're wrong about Leeds and anyone else we've criticised over the course of this podcast. And anyone we've been really, really nice to. Maybe you just want to tell her that we're totally wrong to be excited about Brighton's win against Man City for some reason. Who knows? But we'll catch you for another podcast. We're going to do one later in the week to review all the transfer business and pick out who's had a good window, who's had a bad one, who had a good deadline day, who had a bad one. So that'll be very, very fun. And we'll see you all for that one.